Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is 12 noon, at least here on the East Coast. And so, wherever you are in the world, we want to welcome you to the Chicken Box, spelled, yes, with two X's, powered by the Afro American newspapers. And if you are here, then you know that we're on the Facebook platform or the Meta platform every Thursday at noon, spending about an hour with you, just talking about topics of interest to the Black community. I'm Frances Tony Draper, CEO and publisher of the 130-year-old Afro-American newspapers. And this is an intergenerational show. And so both of our co-hosts are here today. We're waiting for Impeccable to log back on. But in the meantime, Courtney, would you introduce yourself and introduce today's topic?
Yes. Hello, my name is Courtney Alexander. It's a pleasure to be with you this week. I am the digital marketing editor for the Afro, and I am also representing Gen Z. For today, we will be talking about Black people versus tracking your ancestry.
Amen. So tracking your and I'm representing baby boomers and our Gen X representative, Impeccable. We expect him to pop on any moment. So today, Courtney, what an exciting conversation we're going to have with two very exciting guests who also are members of the Afro team. Next week, we have a special edition coming out talking about tracking your ancestry. And we know that in the Black community, that's a big deal because in lots of times the records are not available, right? Or they're sketchy, and so our guests are both going to talk about things that they've discovered about their ancestry. It's so exciting. And one of our guests has even done a podcast about that. So without further ado, let's bring on camera Lenora Housey, who is the executive director for the Afro, celebrating 10 years at the Afro this month. And she's also our advertising director, and the Reverend Dorothy Bulware, who is our managing editor, who I believe, Reverend Bulware, you have been with us on and off for probably your entire career, for about 30 years or more. But welcome. And today to our viewers, we pray that you'll like and share this video, this broadcast rather. It's not a video. We are live. We're live. Share this broadcast. Today, we're going to talk to Reverend Bulware and Lenora, not so much about their roles at the Afro, even though they are exciting roles. We're going to talk a little bit about their ancestry. And so, Courtney, I've done some introduction. Anything else you want to say about either of our guests?
Yes, they are a pleasure to work with. Both of them have contributed so much to the Afro, and we are grateful to have you on the team. They are insightful, and we just look up to you guys. So thank you for everything that you do.
That's wonderful. And Reverend Bulware is the author of how many books, Reverend Bulware, have you written?
7.
She is the author of 7 books. For those who follow biblical numerology, that's the number of completion, but I don't think she's finished yet. And Lenora is the producer, the announcer, the creator of a very popular podcast called The Secrets of the Church. I'm trying to pronounce it correctly because it's spelled CHURTCHED with the T looking like a cross. And so if you're just tuning in, this is the Chicken Box, powered by the 130-year-old Afro-American newspapers. Welcome. You want to put your name in the chat. We are glad to have you. And here comes our, I told you this was live, so you're liable to hear anything. Here comes our fearless co-host, Impeccable. I was just getting ready to turn it over to one of our guests, but do you want to say something first?
Mic check.
All right, there you are.
How's everybody? I know we're about to get into the conversation. When you're dealing with technology and streaming, you got to move it around, keep it moving. But I am excited about today's story. I'm going to get my popcorn so I can just sit here and just hear about Black people versus and the journey to finding your ancestors. Good God Almighty. Anyway, if you're just tuning in, share it, like it, go to afro.com, like anything Afro. Look, all of those likes help us keep broadcasting and informing and inspiring. So I don't know what I missed. So I'm trying not to repeat myself. So Dr. Draper, you keep going. I'll just jump right in.
Well, we introduced everybody. And without further ado, I want to jump into one of these ladies' stories. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you, Reverend Bulware, if you would, well, let me ask you first, Lenora, if you would just tee it up, tell us a little bit about your story and what led you to do this very popular podcast, which is now in season 2. So if you give us like a teaser of your story, give us like a high level summary, and then Reverend Bulware, we're going to come to you for the same thing. All right, Lenora, we're all. I'm like impeccable. I got my tea. I got some
Get your popcorn and add some extra butter. It's that kind of show. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Although I know I'm a member of the Afro team, but thank you for having me on as a guest on this on Chicken BOXX. This is a very important topic, I believe, for the community and very near and dear to me. Just as a high level overview of my story, I was adopted as a baby. And so I was growing up believing that the parents who adopted me were my biological parents. And then along the way, even as a child, I just had inklings and feelings and instincts that told me otherwise. And so you'll hear a little later when I get into more detail about my journey to find my ancestry and my biological roots and the drama that ensued after that.
Wow. All right. We're itching to ask some more questions about that, the drama that ensued. All right, Reverend Bulware, tee us up.
So can I just say that if you know Tyler Perry, give him a call and tell him that this is the podcast that he doesn't want to miss, because this is his next great movie, Unchurched by Lenore Housey. Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, because it's a great story. Anybody who loves podcasts, find it and listen to it. Okay. So I grew up in what one might call a foster home, although I started out with my original family. By the time I was 6.5, I was living in a foster home. And I say that to say not that I was in a foster care system, but that I was living in a home with a family who was not my birth family. I always knew my mother, and I actually always knew who my father was, even though I did not have an ongoing relationship with him at all throughout my life. I wanted to be one of those kids who had a mother and a father like everybody else in the household. But, you know, I lived in a strange household with cousins and a grandfather and a grandmother and people who I adopted as they took me in. And whenever you talk about my grandmother, hear me talk about my grandmother, which I do a lot. She was a lady who went to church with my mother's mother and promised her that if anything happened to her, she would take me and raise me. And my grandmother always said, okay, but nothing's going to happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to you. And sort of poo-pooed it. Well, one day something happened. And in looking back, I realized that this lovely church lady kept her promise and took a 7-year-old child and raised her until she was 18 and ready to be married. So great grace on Susan Frances Boosbird Fuller, who raised me. And I'll tell you the rest of the story and how the next step actually happened at the Afro.
All right. Wow, that's it. Courtney Alexander, you have a question for either one of our guests? I can't wait to get into the rest of the story.
Yeah. So I want to know, like, what inspired you to tell your stories, and were you feeling overwhelmed or like anxious about coming forward, like with the information that you knew, or like, were you anxious about like finally getting those answers?
Well, for me, what inspired me was decades long secrecy that I was living in and that I knew many others were living in as a result of just not knowing who they came from. What I found from talking to others, even with Reverend Boulware and others who were adopted or raised in foster care, that there is some sort of instinctual, innate mechanism that drives you to want to know who you came from. It's just there. It's nothing to do with how much or little the people who are raising you love you, nothing to do with being treated unfairly or unequally, but there's just something in us that wants to know who we came from, who are our ancestors, who do we look like, basic things like that. And so I was inspired to tell this story after finding my biological parents and siblings and hearing from them just how much this secret and the revealing of the secret, which by the way, the secret was me, how much it impacted their lives. And I really wanted to get it out there to give other people the freedom to tell their truth, to walk in their truth and accept who they are and who loves them and who they love.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree with that. There was always this feeling of belonging nowhere, juxtaposed to belonging everywhere. Like I have all these families that I'm connected to, you know, the people who raised me, the people from church who helped raise me, the biological relatives who are still around. And yet with belonging to all those people, I felt like I belonged to nobody.
Wow.
So that was something that I really wanted to experience. Just where do I belong? And why can't I have a normal family like everybody else, you know?
That's amazing. So I'm going to ask both of you, how did you find your biological family? How long ago was it? And I know for you, Reverend Boulware, you found a brother, I believe, just recently. So like in the last 6 months or so that you didn't know you had. And so Lenora, tell us a little bit, give us a little bit more of, because the secrets of the church, why is your podcast called that? And can you make that connection for us?
Sure. And so I, as I mentioned earlier, was adopted as a child. And again, grew up knowing that as much as I love my biological family, that there was something that was different about me.
You mean your adopted family? You loved your adopted family?
Loved my adopted family, yes. And shout out to John and Betty Housey, who have now gone on, but who chose me to be a part of their family, which is always very special. And so, but there was always, again, a part of me that just felt like there's something different about me than the rest of my siblings that I was growing up with in the Housey household and in my parents, and just wanting to know why that was so. And so as I got older, always having that feeling, and when I walked into my parents, into the dining room where they were entertaining guests, and I just blurted out, thinking that, you know, I was being a little smart aleck. Oh, you don't have to stop talking. I know you're talking about me, and I know I'm adopted. And in a hush, as they say, fell over the room. And my parents confirmed, well, yes, you are adopted. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so throughout those years, and that was when I was about 12, throughout those years, I was always looking around like, are you my parents? Are you my siblings? And again, trying to make that connection. And then one year when I was living in Philadelphia, I happened to hear on the news that the records of adopted children in Pennsylvania were going to be unsealed temporarily, which in itself is a whole issue. Why they're sealed, I don't know. But, and if you wanted to find out your biological heritage, if you will, you had a small window to do so. So I sent off for my original birth certificate, found out what my birth name was, which was completely different than Lenore Housey. It was Rochelle Thompson. So I'm looking at this piece of paper. I'm like, oh, wow, that was my name. And it had my mother's name on it. And I proceeded to do, good old fashioned investigating, because this was years before social media and all the tools we have now. And I found her, and I showed up on her job. I just walked in to her job one day. I was 30 years old. She hadn't seen me since the day she gave birth to me. And I walked into her job and said, I'm your daughter.
Okay, that sounds like the end of podcast episode 1. We'll have to go back. Impeccable, you look like you can't wait to add something.
I am. I'm just trying to bring it in. It's to people who might just tuned in, and you see that it's Black people versus and tracking your ancestry, but more. I mean, a lot of time when you think about tracking your ancestry, you think about. Oh, goodness gracious! I'm sorry. I'm in the hotel and I try to get better internet, and somebody's in the tour of the conference room. You you think about like Ancestry.com and seeing who's in your family and everything, but this is more. We should have said, we should have titled this "Adopted," but not something, or something else. You know what I mean? It'd been like this. That's not my family, or whatever it is.
Yes.
But it is. You know what I mean? Because the family is really not based on blood. It's based on who loves you. Because sometimes your own family that you quote unquote a family, they treat you worse than the people who are your Afro family, your church family, or family or friends that you just grow up with. So if you just tuned in, this is what it is. It's the Afro American newspaper, the oldest Black business in Maryland, 130 years. We're celebrating our birthday, in case you didn't know. Go to afro.com. Support us. We need to hire young, dynamic people like Courtney Alexander to come in and help keep this 130 years going. We're going to get back into the story. That was a quick commercial break, and I'm ready for just some more of the story, because a lot of times people don't tell you the story. You think your name is Honora, and you find out Rochelle was what they thought you were going to be called, but God said you were going to be called Lenore.
That's right. That's right. I just want to answer the question you asked, Dr. Draper, about why the name of my podcast is Secrets of the Church. Because after finding my biological mother, and she told me on day one who my father was. And it's interesting when she said his name, I said, where have I seen that name before? Because as I mentioned, I did, feet on the pavement. I went to the Department of Vital Statistics. I assumed that after she gave birth to me, she got married, because that's what you did back, in the late 50s and early 60s. And so I looked up her marriage certificate, and I found out that 4 years after giving birth to me, that she did in fact get married. And of course, as you all know, the pastor who marries you, his name is on the birth certificate, right? On the marriage certificate, right? And so fast forward to when I walked on my biological mother's job. It was MLK Day. I'll never forget it. 1989. I walked on her job and told her who I was. And not that quickly, obviously, there was a way I went about doing that. But she then told me, and I asked her, so who was my father and what was the situation? Because again, when you're adopted and you don't know your biological roots, I didn't know how I got here. Was I a product of rape or incest? I didn't know what it was that led her to give me up for adoption. And she revealed to me that my father was married and that he was her pastor. And when she said his name, I said, where have I seen that name before? Only to remember that I saw his name on her marriage certificate, which means, if you have lost track of this, my biological father performed the marriage of my biological mother and the man she married.
Wow.
So that's that.
and tell us how we can listen to this podcast. So that was just like around episode 2, right?
It's sure. Thank you. You can find Secrets of the Church on Spotify, on Apple Music, on iTunes, on any platform where you listen to your podcast. It's also on YouTube, and so it's quite a story. Even though it's my life, sometimes it's hard to believe that this all really did happen.
Well, that part right there was quite a story. There is the cover of Secrets of the Church. Okay. Rem Bulware, you just found a brother, right? You want to tell us a little bit about the path to that?
Yeah, but let me go back a little bit because I want to
Okay.
connect to the church too.
Uh-oh.
So because my mother was 17 years old, and my father was 30 something, was the 30-year-old something minister of music at the church. So that was the initial connection. And I don't really know anything after that. That's just, on my birth certificate. But I say that to say that there was a church connection apparently. But
Got it.
Yes.
Got it. A
and
church
so
connection.
the next step in my story, because I didn't go looking, I knew my father's name, I knew my mother, and had regular interaction with her. So I didn't go looking, but I was sitting at the Afro one day going through the funeral programs that morticians used to drop off at our office every day, selecting ones to be printed in the paper. And I picked up one and went, I know this guy. So I went into the program, to read the obituary and everything. And that's the day I found out that I had a brother connected through my father. And I also found out that my father wasn't deceased, and I thought he was. But anyway, so it was from that program I knew that this gentleman that I had known some years ago was actually my biological brother, and I had no way of knowing until I saw that program.
So he was the deceased in the program.
Yeah, he was the deceased, and he had been my brother. So I held on to that program for dear life. I still have it. We collect family history through obituaries. So we go back and look, and we can see what kind of jobs people did and all that kind of stuff. So every now and then I would take that out and read it. I don't know what I was looking for, but I would take it out and read it. So last summer when I took it out to read it, I saw a name on the inside as one of the brothers, and I noticed that on the back cover, there was a ministerial title in front of the name. And I was like, how come I didn't see that before? So I didn't go to Ancestry, but I went to Google. And that's when I found this gentleman who was a clergy person who apparently was my brother. And I still didn't move on it right away, because even when I saw the funeral program and knew that there was a family connection, what am I going to do? Knock on somebody's door and say I might be your sister because your preacher father played around a little bit. I wasn't going to do that. But anyway, so that's when we got to the next step in locating this real person who I saw on the internet and all of that. And I'll tell you the rest of it when you ask me another question.
I want to get back into played around. Okay, if you just tuned in, let's get into it. Okay, because it ain't just preachers who play around, but sometimes they put them up on the pedestal. They said every person can subject themselves to a sinful action, even at the right or wrong moment. Now, after you do it, can you woman or man up enough to deal with the consequences? And a lot of times you'll be at the funeral. Well, who's that in the back crying? I'm his other daughter. Like 25 years later, you like, hey, where is that? You know what I mean? Like, own up to your mistake and move on. Anyway, that's that. I was on the box for a second. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in there since you said they're playing around like it was something that you do outside in the yard. Like at the school time, and he was playing around. You know what I mean?
But you're so right, Kevin. And again, hence the name of and the reason, one of the reasons for my podcast, because we all live with some level of secrecy to some extent, but to have that level of deception, because there's secrecy and there's deception, to have that level of deception within our houses of worship can create a lot of long-term pain, and again, which is why I even spell church CURTCHED, because these secrets, these lies, let's just call them what they are can be painful to people who had nothing to do with the act. And so you mentioned, who's in the back of the church crying, saying, that's my daddy. Well, I didn't do that, but before my father passed away, my biological father passed away, I did, and this is 7-8 years after meeting my biological mother. So I knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
I knew where he was, but I was so overwhelmed with meeting all these new family people that I look just like. I mean, I am my biological mother's twin. Like, I think God did that on purpose so that she couldn't deny me if she wanted to. But several years after meeting her, and just by really God's divine plan, because I went to Florida not planning to go and meet my biological father. I went to go on vacation. And the girlfriend of mine who I was visiting with said, didn't you tell me your biological father lived in Florida? And I'm like, yeah, why? So, I'm over it. God put it on her heart to compel me to find him while I was there. And so that Sunday, we found his church, and I showed up at his church for Sunday morning service.
It's always a friend, fellas. Listen, you think you're getting away with something, and the woman has let it go, but her friend don't let it go. She's like, you did my girl wrong. We're gonna find out about you. If you just tuned in, this is the Chicken Box, and we're talking about tracking our ancestors, but as well as tracking our biological family, especially if you've been through a foster system or an adopted system, and it's something innately that just drives you to seek, or just to know. I think you just want to know. But then we touched on some things about the church, and you said it affects not only the family members of the church, but it affects the church family, because once, you remember the show Scandal, once the quote unquote scandal gets out, it puts a spin on a person's mindset about church and God, even though it was a human, which is so, I don't want to say backwards, but it's like, I'm following a leader and he fell down and scraped his knee. I don't want to follow him or her anymore. You know what I mean? But really, you were following God, but you were serving there. But anyhow.
Yeah, anyhow, Lenore left us at the church door.
And the church hurt comes out.
Yeah, and you're right, it does come out. And then I guess the irony is that both of these ladies are ordained ministers in their own right. But Lenore, you left us at the church door. So your friend said, find your father. You found the church. And then what happened?
So we dropped. And again, folks, this was before GPS. And I have no sense of direction. So it was really fortunate that as large as the state of Florida is, his church actually was 30 minutes from where my girlfriend lived. Like I said, I knew he was in Florida, but I didn't know whether it was Southern Florida, Northern Florida, somewhere in between. And so we found our way to his church. I walk in. Now, of course, I've never seen him in my life. I have to ask the usher at the door, is Reverend so-and-so, I do not reveal their last names, is he here? And she pointed him out to me on the platform. She said, oh yes, he's here. He's not preaching today, but he's here, and he was sort of officiating the service. And the first thing that I noticed or saw that just sort of hit me when I walked in and realized who he was, he had this very loud, bellowing, singing voice. And I stood there like frozen in time, like, oh my goodness. So that's where I get my singing voice, because I sing as well, as did my biological mother. And so we sat through the whole service. And in smaller churches where they ask you to get up and say who you are and where you're from. So I decided this was not going to be one of those, as we say, Tyler Perry movie moments where I was going to say in front of the whole congregation, I'm his daughter. But so I just said, who I was and where I was from. I was living in Maryland at that time. I had moved to Maryland, and I said, and that was that. And so after the service was over, my girlfriend, again, she said, okay, you got to meet him. So we stayed and made, watched everybody leave the sanctuary. And I went up to him and said, may we have a word? Again, He had not seen me since the day I was born, and now I'm almost 40. And what's striking to me, and he and I talked about this afterwards, is that he did not immediately know who I was because, again, I look just like my biological mother. And so we, went back to the study and had some conversation, and I played it. I played it, y'all. I was like, I kind of led him down the road. So I'm like, he's like, well, tell me about yourself. I'm like, well, okay, so tell me about yourself. And I told him that I was originally from Pittsburgh, and he said, oh, I spent some time in the Pittsburgh area. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, you sure did. And then when he asked me, so what's your name again? Because by now, he told me later, he's beginning to suspect who I might be. And he asked me to tell me his name. And I said, my name is Lenore Housey, but that's not the name I was born with. And I told him the name I was born with, which he recognized because he was part of naming me when I was born. And that's how I met my father. Hear the rest of it on Secrets of the Church.
You better get to that podcast now. I'm telling you, it's hot. It's hot and juicy. I'm like, hey, later for the housewives that I don't watch. My wife does, but I see it. You see what I mean? You know what I mean, fellas? I walk by the TV and I see it. But the church, anyhow, where can they listen? On Spotify?
On Spotify, on iTunes, anywhere you listen to podcasts, it's there. Secrets of the Church. I think Lisa may have a clip of it, but it airs weekly, except for the weeks where I'm too tired to do it. But it airs weekly. And as Dr. Draper said earlier, we are now in season 2. So I started the podcast in 2020, 2021, I don't know, during the pandemic. And we are now in season 2. And what I like about this season is that I'm hearing other people's stories now. So I'm interviewing people who have gone through their own journey and their own search and found their biological roots.
So let's talk about that. It's people who hear podcasts and, they've even transitioned these type of streams and kind of call them podcasts with videos as well. So was it hard to just start recording your story? Or how did you start on a podcast?
Well, here's what's interesting, and I'll just give glory and credit to where it's due. The idea to do a podcast was literally put in my spirit by the Lord. When I tell you that I had no idea what a podcast was, I had never listened to one. I didn't know how one got made, but it just dropped in my spirit. You need to do a podcast because I was already telling this story in a book that I'm writing. And so I was like, a podcast, like you do turn on the radio and find out, how do you do that? And so I then connected with a couple producers who obviously knew what podcasting was all about. And I recorded. Sometimes I just record it on my phone. I do have like a professional mic, but sometimes I just record it on my phone. I send it to them. They add the music and the dramatic effects, and voila, there it is. So it's not difficult, but I had no idea when the idea was dropped on my spirit to do a podcast. I had no idea what that even meant.
So if you go ahead.
Sounds like we should hear a clip, and then I want to go back to Reverend Boulware because I think she has something else she wants to add to her story. We need to speak about her story. So Lisa, do we have a clip? Here it is. Okay.
Should I say that I was a secret? My life, my existence, all a secret. One that was literally conceived and born right into the church, enshrouded in rumors and whispers for 30 years until truth pierced its way through and uncovered a world and a family that I didn't even know existed. And for the most part, a family who didn't know I existed either.
Righty. And there you have it.
Man, you have a beautiful speaking voice. It was like you could do voiceover work. Maybe
That's my podcast voiced.
Okay. Do you have a different name when you put the podcast voice on? Or are you still Lenore?
I'm still Lenore. First, last name. my audience knows who I am. I just leave the last names of all my 1,000 family members anonymous.
Absolutely. Why you laughing so hard, Dr. Bowen? You know, ladies who they're like, well, I'm Kathy in the daytime, but at night.
Oh,
Yes,
Lord.
Kevin. Absolutely.
So Reverend Boulware, when you found your sibling latest, I should say it that way, because I know you're finding your sibling, who knows. How did that get set up, and what was his reaction? And
So I'm trying to say it without putting any names in it, but what happened was when I did the Google thing and found him, I found out there was an affiliation with a friend of mine who happens to be an Afro friend. And so when she found herself in the same place as he was, she told me, I'm just going to ask. That's all. I'm just going to ask him. And so the way she asked him was, do you have any siblings outside of your birth family? And he said to her, I know I have one because my father used to write about her in journals. Her name is Dorothy Scott, which is me.
That's when I need to play some dramatic music.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Like this platform has music, but I don't know what it sounds like. Hold on, let's see.
Because the message I got back from my
Right, we're gonna do our own podcast one day.
That's right.
Have you ever saw that when people act out a sing? Well, they used to do it on radio back in the day when they would have kind of like
they drop the silverware on the floor.
Right. I guess you might tune in a lot more. I guess that's what makes podcasts so good sometimes, because when you can listen, your imagination can bring like someone's reading you a book. Remember, was it ever a time that you just wanted somebody to read you a story at some point in your life? And you remember that, Courtney? Does your generation do you still get bedtime stories?
No, not really.
I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about when you were little. Do you remember those days?
No, my parents never did that.
No. Man, that's what a podcast feels like. You just snuggle up. You got your favorite book, Green Eggs and Ham, Sam I Am, or whatever your favorite book was back then. And it's the same book every night. I don't know why.
Okay, Kevin, you stepped on my line.
Okay. Tell me your line. Tell me your line.
No, the message I got from my friend who started the interaction was, he said your name before I did. That was amazing to me, the whole thing. He said my name before she could even ask him.
Hey, I got in the spirit for a second. How it says God knew who you were before you knew. But when you said that, I don't know if anybody else felt that when she just said that. Anyway, good God Almighty! This is the Chicken Boxes, where we come to speak our truth. You never know what's going to happen on this show. We can go from Yale to jail and everything in between. We have Black people versus tracking our ancestry. We have two wonderful Afro family members, as well as ministers, as well as beautiful ladies who are sharing their testimony a little bit about their journey to finding their true parents. Now let's get to the point where what happens once you find them? What is the natural response? Or is it, oh my God, or is it relief? Or
well, let me go first because I only have one. The Nora has like 105.
Literally, because
So all my life I have been telling God I wanted an older brother, and what I have is a younger brother. And I think we're just learning how to be sister and brother. We've had the family gathering when everybody came and met, and just overwhelmed him with love. And I actually had him with me at the Afro Gala this summer. So we're learning how to be. I've had sisters, but I've never had a brother. So I'm learning how their relationship.
So you had a younger brother though?
No, I said I have one now. The new brother is younger than I.
Oh, the new brother is younger.
Yeah.
Cause Courtney, you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a blended family. I have 4 siblings.
Are any of them younger
Yeah, I have 2 younger siblings.
brothers or
Yeah, 2 younger brothers.
two younger brothers? So, typically the big sister. Any big sisters in the house? Raise your hand. Kind of, kind of, puts the strong arm on the younger brother until they old enough to hit you back in the chest, and you're like, "That's enough of that." So, how was your relationship with your younger brothers? Because it's different than when you meet them later in life.
I would say so. We have such of a blended family that my older sister and I we had to take on a lot of responsibility to help raise my younger brothers while she worked. So I guess they would view us more like I guess parent figures. I was just very supportive and uplifting, and I made sure that they had everything that they needed. And still to this day, I'm on them. Like, make sure you do your homework. Make sure that you are on top of things. And I just check in, and I'm like, if you need anything, just let me know. So I think just being a positive role model for them, that's essential for me.
So you were a good big sister, Dr. Draper. I saw you raise your hand when you said you were a big sister.
Absolutely. I'm still a big sister.
All right. What was it like for you?
I'm like, we have a blended family. So my mother was married 3 times, and each person so I have 2 brothers. I mean, no, 1 brother, 1 sister. We have the same father and mother, and then everybody else is blended in there some kind of way. So it's a whole bunch of us, but I still am the oldest sister. So I had a lot of responsibility for the younger ones. When you're young and things don't go well in the family, at least from your standpoint, the first thing you want to know from your parents is, am I what? Am I adopted? Or you tell
why is that such a thing? Am I adopted? Or even if you look like you don't look like the rest of your brothers and sisters, you say, wait a minute, what happened?
Right. And so in my own family, my husband and I have been married a long time. We have a blended family grouping of offspring, including 1 adopted child, 1 child we had together, 1 child I had already when we married, and 1 child he had already. So one thing I want to say too about this whole adoption issue, it helps you when you find your biological parents to answer that question. Anybody go to the doctor and they say, all right, anybody in your family have this, and this, and you don't know. Sometimes you don't know when you have biological parents, but when you are in a family that not your family of biological origin, it's an I don't know. And that's an important question to be able to answer. So
that was actually one of my primary motivations for wanting to find my biological family and my ancestry and my roots. I grew up in a very loving family. I was not in need of or even desiring another set of parents. I was just tired of going to the doctor and getting that question and not being able to answer it. And then the older I got, the more I understood how much genetics play a role in your health decisions, in your lifestyle decisions. And so that was one of my primary reasons for doing that. And I have since benefited from having that knowledge, finding out that diabetes was a major issue in my biological mother's family. And so for almost 30 years, I have worked hard, fought hard to prevent becoming a diabetic because I knew it was in my DNA. So that was important. But if I can answer the question about the siblings that somebody asked about, how do they respond? Because I do think it's important for people to know that that's a story in itself. Because, you show up on people's doorsteps or at their jobs or in their churches, and they already have families that are going. And so my biological mother was married and had 3 boys. Her husband nor her children knew anything about me. He didn't know before he married her that she had a child that she gave up for adoption. And so the beginning of my relationship with her husband was a little rocky, and I got it. He was like, who are you? Looking just like her. But instantly she had 3 sons after giving birth to me, and I instantly connected and bonded with my little brothers because, like Reverend Boulware, I didn't have younger brothers. Before I grew up in a house of all sisters, and so I was so elated, and I instantly bonded with them. My biological father's family, I have 8 siblings from him. So I went from being in this very small bubble called the Housies to having like 17 siblings. I don't know. He has actually, my biological father has 10
Good
children.
God Almighty! How many different mamas?
3, including mine.
3, including yours.
Yes. 2 wives and the side church woman that we know of. And my siblings and I all joke about it because we said there could be others out there, but I told them I'm done looking. I found
At 17, I am done. So, okay, this is Share Thursday. Okay, so anyway, I have 3 biological children. One was during my first marriage, but it was, let's say, what did you say earlier? Playing around. That's when I was a child. You know, I used to play around. You know, children play around until you grow up and be a man. But anyway, I had the choice, fellas and ladies, to conceal this beautiful blessing or to share, because the child really didn't do anything, right? So if you don't, it's you being selfish to live up to your mistake to not share with the family. So if there's anybody out there hearing me now, it's better to share it now. If you played around and in the result you got a blessing, because it's not a curse really, because you don't know. We know that's my only biological son, and I had 2, you know, and so it's not easy to say, hey, you know what, honey, I got a call today, and you know what I mean. It's not easy to say, but it was necessary for my son to know his grandmother and his sisters, and they're all super tight now. And I told her, I waited 3 weeks, and that's not 3 years, but 3. I had to ponder it in myself and then say, hey, why be selfish to that particular child, because they had nothing to do
That's it.
with my bad decision or playing around as a child. So I hope that helps somebody. And see, maybe you never know. Maybe you found out something new about me. It's a lot of blending going on. It's a divorce rate. It's 50% in America. So blended families are a thing, but you can't. You know, you have to handle them with certain gloves, and you can't just throw them together in a blender and expect them to be all right with each other. You got to pretty much put them in the crock pot for you chefs out there. Put it on a low heat. Don't turn the heat up too high and let it simmer. And then over time, they'll soften up and they'll begin to love each other. I don't know where I went with there. That is Share Thursday. I don't know anybody else who wants to.
Sounds like you need to let you putting in a bid to be on the podcast.
Hey, you know, I'm right there. I'm blended family. I didn't had a child outside of the marriage. I'm on my 3rd and final marriage. Listen, I got some stories, but anyway, we are talking.
I think we all have stories. I think the thing that, and I'm gonna get on the box for a minute. We're
Oh yeah, you know, we haven't said hello. Hello, Misha.
Yeah, say hello to people on. Yeah, say hello.
Rosalie, Anissa, Alana, Jewel. We got both Jules. We have
Hey,
Jules, y'all at the Afro. How are Jules doing? We got Bonnie Deans tuning in, and other people who just haven't tuned in. We know that you're there when you just put a little comment, tell us where you're from, or say, hey, you know what I mean? Or just say hello. Look, go to the afro.com. We're the oldest Black business in Maryland. And I'm going to say it every week, 130 years. That is something if you've ever started your own business, and we still keep going. We're informing, inspiring, and educating. Go get a subscription, less than 2 Uber Eats. Afro.com, yes. We have a legacy paper that your grandmama or your great-grandmama had, and we still have it if you like to feel paper, but we are tech sexy, y'all. So go to afro.com. We are moving fast in the digital lane. That was my commercial. Hi, Diane. Hi, everybody. Listen, you got to get to these podcasts. Ladies, thank you for sharing these stories. The hour is going fast. Dr. Draper, we can't give let's get one more juicy tidbit, Lenore, to just entice somebody to listen to
Oh,
this.
yeah, so both Lenora and Dorothy talked about the big connections. I mean, both of them are women of faith. Both of them are clergy themselves. Both of them have found out where both their preaching and their singing came from, right? They found out all of this. Lenora, I am just curious about how did you approach your 17 siblings? I mean, my goodness, 17, that's quite a family to go from what you had. You thought you had one sibling or two siblings, and now
Well,
you.
I grew up with 3 sisters, so they're included in the 17.
And what was their reaction? The 3 that you grew up with when they found out that they were sharing you with the world.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, because I really I try to be very sensitive to everyone in this whole story. To the point, though, where I have to tell myself, and Kevin, you just said this, none of this, I didn't ask for any of this. I was the child born into this. This is my truth and it's my story. And I'm hoping that everybody can understand and embrace it. But if they can't, I'll keep praying for you. But while I met my mother's children shortly after meeting her, 11 months to be exact, I met them. So back in 1990, it wasn't until 2019 that I met my father's children. It wasn't like I didn't know they existed. And I think they may have known about me, but they suspected I existed. But as I mentioned earlier, I had so many new family members that I wasn't really interested in finding more. And so it wasn't until my brother, stay with me, my brother, the oldest of my biological mother's 3 children, who I am, by the way, fully related to. He is also the Reverend's son. Hear more about that on Secrets of the Church. But it wasn't until he unfortunately and tragically died in 2019 and went to his viewing. Of course, I'm a sister, and standing in the line at his casket, this young woman comes up to me and says, and I was asking everybody who came around, how do you know my brother? And so when I asked this woman that question, she didn't answer my question. She gave me her name, and her last name was the same as my biological father's name.
Thompson. Oh yeah, well, Thompson is not the real name. Okay.
No. I don't say his name. So let's just say.
I'm sorry.
That's right. That's okay. No, Thompson was my birth name, but my biological father's last name was different. So she comes up to me and she says, "Hi, I am Kathy. We're going to say Anderson." And I said, "Oh, are you Reverend Herb's daughter?" Now, this is at my brother's casket. And there are hundreds of people standing behind her waiting to come up around for the viewing. But we stopped it. And she said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Are you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she looked at our brother's casket and said, "Is he our brother?" Yeah. She said, "Is he our brother?" And I said, "Yes, he is." So it was in that moment, just 3 years ago, that I met my father's children. I confirmed what they already knew, but I confirmed that we shared a brother. Their father fathered me and my brother, and all of that came out at my brother's casket. And so after that, I met the rest of them, and we have a wonderful, great relationship. I love them as if I grew up with them, and I believe they love me that way as well.
Wow. Listen for more. Whew, the secrets of the church. You know what I'm saying? Let me hear you say it, Lenore. Go ahead. The church.
Tune in to Secrets of the Church, available on any platform you listen to your podcast.
That was your radio voice. You usually say to me, the church. You usually give me the
I didn't know what voice you wanted me to use.
the church. You know what I mean? The church.
Secrets of the Church.
Absolutely. Listen, our time is winding down. This is so good. I think you have pushed us into, the Afro is going to have to do more podcasting because we have 130 years of so many great stories. And you, I think, have sparked the spark. So the Chicken BOXX, you probably said it earlier, in Baltimore, if you're from Baltimore or DC, DMV area, you know, it's 4 greasy wings, fried, enough to make the box, and it seeps through the box, but it's good. You know what I mean? This, and I don't even eat fried anymore, but I think about it. I can smell it and remember what it used to taste like. But here on the Afro News is where we speak our truth. You get a chance to get on the box and speak your truth. So we got final words, and then we're gonna get on the box. And Courtney, we'll start with you. You are on the box about.
Before we get on the box,
Okay.
Reverend, when you get on the box, could you tell us about next week's special edition and if there's an opportunity for people to participate at all? Okay, Courtney, you're on the box.
There's a lot that I want to say. Your stories are just so like intriguing, and I have learned so much just within the past hour. I just want to say, like, you are so brave and like strong for like coming forward to tell your story, because for some people I think that they might be like embarrassed about something, or they don't have like the courage to come forward and like discover the truth. Sometimes it's easier for us to like hide in the dark and like not discover these things because we're afraid to. So I think both of you are courageous, and I'm so glad that you got the opportunity to reconnect with your family, and now you have the opportunity to create these new relationships. Like, there are unlimited possibilities with that. So that is amazing, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Bowe or Dr. Draper, who wants to go next?
Dr. Bulwer can go.
Next week, our special edition is going to cater to those who have curiosity about where they're from and who they're connected to. I won't give away the details, but if you have a story you'd like to share, if you'd like to just write it down, or if you have a story you'd like to share with a reporter, you can send me an email at editor@afro.com. You know, it's the kind of thing you should do if you feel sort of incomplete, if you want to know something about yourself. Imagine me thinking about this biological father who I only saw a few times in my entire life, and finding out at the age of 72 that he was writing journals with my name in them. It sort of changes the whole thing around. So if you have an inkling to find out more about who you are and where you came from and who you came from, then please share your story with us. Be sure to read our special edition next week. And if you know somebody who has a story, we'd be happy to tell it, because that's what we do at the Afro, where Black lives always have mattered to us.
Boom. I love that. You ladies, boy, you guys have such soothing voices. Soothing voices. Dr. Draper?
I want to say that Ancestry.com and 23andMe have nothing on Lenora Housey, Dorothy Bulwer, and others who are so brave enough, as Courtney said, to tell your stories. Thank you so much. I believe that you helped somebody on today, because we really are one family. And when we go back and look at the history of our people, and even the abuses that our forefathers and mothers endured, children were born out of those relationships. Some were secrets, some have come to light. Even in our own family, we believe that the founder of the Afro, that his father was fathered, that he was fathered by the slave owner. So that's another whole discussion of how that happens. But I think the beauty in your stories, ladies, thank you again for sharing them, is that you have put human faces and experiences right here on Front Street for the rest of us to be curious about our own heritage and our ancestry, to own it, yes, for the health reasons, but also to help us to feel more complete, right? Because when I know where I come from, as you said, Lenora, you looked exactly like your mother, your biological mother. That kind of, to me, it brings it full circle, to say, this is who I am. And so I am made up of a lot of different people, a lot of different experiences. And so hats off to both of you ladies. And for those who are watching, We want to tell your stories. Now we understand, and this is for another time, I'm sure, another chicken box, that everybody who starts on that journey doesn't have a happy ending. I want to say that
That's right.
I know some experiences of people trying to do what you've done, and they've been rebuffed. So that happens as well. We might have another show to talk about that, and that's heartbreaking. But thank you all for your courage. Lenora, I always say all the best for your podcast. I've listened to every episode of season 1. I've got to catch up for season 2. And Reverend Boulware, you've got some books and a website. I don't know if it addresses this topic, but author of 7 books. I know that we wanted to. There it is. There's your website there as well. I'm off the box, Impeccable.
Absolutely. I'm in an undisclosed location and they're doing some moving in the room behind me. But I'm going to start out with this, okay? The first blended family, and I appreciate everybody who just tuned in, who was texting, Michelle and Lisa, who said they were just talking about this in their Bible study, was Jesus. Oh my God, did you guys know that? The first blended family, because he came from a different father, right? So that happened. So then, guys at a certain point in their life like to be called players. Why? I don't know. They want to play. But Dr. Boulware said, they like to play, and sometimes playing has caused a child outside of it. All I'm saying, my last thing on the box is own up to your mistakes, because God will forgive you. He really will, and he'll make it beautiful again. But the longer you hold that in, the longer it takes for forgiveness to set in and to help somebody else who didn't deserve to go through a life of a certain kind of emotion and feeling like they're not connected because you couldn't own up to your mistakes. So fellas, man up, woman up, and let's move forward in love. You're not going to be perfect. If that was the case, if you believe in God, he would have never died for you. And I'm off the box. Lenore, how's-y?
Oh,
You're in the box. You
okay.
final word.
Okay, let me get back.
Final word today, and that's gonna be it. And we're gonna end the show.
Well, just very briefly, again, thank you for allowing me to come on and to share the story with the Afro family, with the listeners of Chicken BOXX. And I will just close, Kevin, by just reinforcing what you said, because again, secrets of the church and secrets of anywhere can be very harmful. And what I say in my podcast as part of my opening is that there are 3 things you cannot hide, and truth is one of them. It will eventually come to light. So everyone, own your truth, walk in your truth. It will be a blessing to everyone involved when you do so.
Absolutely. And if you haven't smiled today, please smile. It makes you feel better. I don't see you smile, Courtney. I see it, Dr. Bowen. I'll try to hold it in. I see that smile. Listen, just smile. Call a senior because they really miss you. You haven't talked to them in a while. Just call them and say hello, because you don't know how long you're going to be here. But the seniors have, according to the books, they are closer to resting than you are. So call them up because they miss your call. Thank you for tuning in. Man, I don't even know what next week's topic is, but you're going to always find something nice and juicy on the Chicken BOXX. Man, I'm hungry. Good night, everybody. Good night. I'm like, good night, like I'm talking to the people in Africa. Good night, my woman kings out there. Good night.